Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to Dash for the super thanks. Really appreciate it. Now that the cabinets are installed, the real work begins. I bought these cabinets unfinished and saved a lot of money. It only took me about 8 hours to install these cabinets. And it's going to take me several days to sand, stain, and spray the cabinets. First thing I'm going to do is remove all the cabinet doors. Before I get too far, I'm going to remove the hinges and I'm going to mark the doors for what cabinet they go to, whether it's the left or the right or what cabinet it is. And because I have to sand and spray everything, I'm going to mark the cabinets inside the hinge pockets. And here's where I label the doors so they won't get sanded off or covered with stain. I'm not going to remove the plastic inserts for the hinge screws. They'd get ruined if I took them out, so I'm just going to work around them. They're going to get covered anyways with the hinge. One thing I don't like that they did is they put the little rubber bumpers on the door already. In order to sand the doors, I have to peel these off, and they're pretty much ruined after that. So I wish they would have just given you a sheet of them or put 2 of them on a sheet and give them to you to install later. Now I have to do this for the rest of the doors. Now make sure I have a container to put the screws and the hinges in so I don't lose them. As you can imagine, this is very time consuming, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit. One thing I want to point out, and I don't have a very good picture of it, is if you're going to do something like this, make sure you lay all the doors flat. They are unfinished and they're going to be sitting for a few days, and you don't want them to warp. Also, you don't want to put them in the garage or somewhere that could get damp or cold. You want to leave them in the room they're going to go in as long as you can. I'm also going to remove the shelves and shelf clips. Now I'm going to sand the cabinets. I'm going to use an orbital sander with 120 grit sandpaper. That is the only grit I'm going to use. Maple is a very hard lumber, so the finer the sandpaper, the lighter the cabinets will be. I've done a sample piece with 120 and 220, and I like the darkness of the stain with the 120 better than I do with the 220. Now I had a choice of finishing the cabinets installed or not installed. I chose to finish the cabinets while they were installed. If I finished them before I installed them, I'd only be able to do so many cabinets at a time. I'd have to wait for them to dry and then start all over again on another batch of cabinets. Doing them this way, I can do them all at one time. I'm going to do the interior of the cabinets with the same grit. The interior of the cabinets don't have to be sanded as well as the frames or the doors. They're going to be left natural and not stained, so they're not going to show any scratches or anything, so you just have to knock down the grain. And I definitely wanted to sand around the holes for the shelf clips. They had a lot of blowout around them, so we'll knock that down. Then the last thing I want to do is knock down all the sharp edges on the face frames. For this I'm just going to use 120 grit drywall sandpaper to knock down the edge. Now I've got to do this to the rest of the cabinets. Now because of time constraints on the day and needing the kitchen, I'm going to do the uppers one day and the bases the next day. After I'm done sanding, I'll vacuum the cabinets out. Before I start staining, I'm going to cover the cabinets below. I don't want any stain to get splashed onto the interior of the cabinets. When you buy cabinets that are finished, they usually spray the face frames separately from the boxes, and then when they're done being finished, then they glue the face frames to the box. Because mine are already assembled, I want to make sure I don't get any stain on the interiors of the cabinets. Now I'm going to use painter's tape on the inside of the cabinet next to the face frame so I don't get stain on the cabinet. Because the face frame is only about 1/4 inch of it away from the top and the bottom, I'm going to use painter's tape to keep the stain off. The face frame on the sides of the cabinets have about a 3/4 inch overhang, so I don't have to worry about getting stain on the sides. I'm going to use rubber gloves for this because it's going to get quite messy. If you get that stain on your hands, it's going to be a little difficult to get off, and it's not really good for your body to absorb those chemicals. I'm using a Varathane gel stain. It's called Weathered Gray. It's almost like staining with paint, so it doesn't run all over and drip all over. Reading the directions, it says to apply the stain and wait 2 to 5 minutes before wiping off. I tried that and found it was a little harder to get the stain off. So once I finished the whole face frame, then I wiped it off. I didn't wait the 2 to 5 minutes. One last thing I'll tape off are the walls. For applying the stain, I'm going to use a foam brush. A regular brush splatters the paint around, and again, I don't want to get it on the interior of the cabinet. Now I'll just start applying the stain and wipe it off. This is my first time using this stain, so I'm not really sure what to expect. You're going to hear a lot of birds in the background. It's a really nice day. We have the windows open and we have bird feeders right by the window, so that's why you can hear the birds really well. You can notice here I'm not really worried about getting stain on the side panel of the cabinet. Later on I'll be making cabinet skins, and they'll be pre-finished, and I will glue and staple them to the side of the cabinet later. Now I'll use rags to start wiping the stain. This is one thing you're going to go through a lot of if you decide to do something like this, and that's rags. If you do something like this, you're going to develop a technique of wiping the stain off. What I mean by this is how long you wait to wipe the stain off, how much pressure you put on the rag to wipe the stain off. All these things make a difference. Whatever technique you use to do this, you want to make sure you do the same thing throughout the job. If you make changes to the procedure you use, the staining may not look even throughout the project. Now you just want to check and make sure you don't have any streaks and that you got all the excess stain off evenly. Well, the first cabinet's done, and I'm really liking the color. One down, many more to go. Now it's the next day and I'm ready to do the base cabinets. Now the only difference is I have to remove the drawers and mark those separately. And you can see here I marked the doors as the sink base right. So what I've done is marked each cabinet with a letter. Then I would mark the back of the drawer with the same letter and a left or a right, depending on if there was two drawers or not. Same with the door. I'd mark the letter and whether it was a left or right hand door. And for the cabinets that had 4 drawers, I would mark the letter and then what number the drawer was, and I'll put it on the back of the drawer where nobody will see it. The other thing I have to do is remove all the hardware for the drawers. As you can see here, the drawers and doors are piling up pretty quickly. Every time I looked at the stack of doors and drawers, I think I had a little bit of panic. Now I will go through the same procedures on the base cabinets as I did for the upper cabinets. You can see here why I taped the bottoms and not the sides. You can see how close the brush is to the bottom. Now I'm getting ready to spray the cabinets with lacquer. This video is a little long, so I'm going to separate it into 2 parts. Make sure you come back next week to see part 2. Thanks for watching.